Well, let's talk about that learning and that transferring the knowledge into. I'm gonna hide myself here for a second and make this full. So, for the paper Steve and I have been writing, we did some research, and from a Harvard Business Review article, found this statistic that just blew us away. Only 12% of employees apply new skills learned in a training program to their jobs. 1 in 10. Do you think this applies to product management from your experience, from what you've seen? And I would say that all of us on this call are probably those 1 in 10 because we're successful, we've made it. But from looking at teams, do you think this applies to product management? And if so, how do we fix that? How do we get product management to do a better job than the rest of the organization when it comes to professional development? Jason, do you have a take?
So I haven't really seen that, but I was just thinking about my own training when this all started, and it goes back to something Steve said. So Steve, give you credit again. Sorry. So he's basically saying, listen, we're going over a lot of topics here. You have been successful to your organization if you take one or two of these topics away and do something with it. And so, that kind of stuck with me forever. And I was actually teach at the same school as Rob. He teaches in Boston, but I taught in the Chesapeake campus. So as an instructor, that's kind of what I would tell my students, the same thing. And I was teaching kind of MIS, Management Information Systems, and database reports and such. I was saying, hey, listen, if you just take one thing away. And so I think that, you can overwhelm a lot of people with a lot of content through training. But if at the end of the day, you're saying, listen, focus, if you do one thing, just go ahead and do something, go back to your office, implement one thing instead of saying, wow, there's all types of things I need to do. And you get overwhelmed and you just go back into what you were doing before the training. And I think, doing focus, you can probably improve those numbers quite a bit.
You see, we need to get you a slide from City Slickers with the guy Jack Palance doing the one thing, and you can use that for that speech. I think that would be perfect.
It's about one thing. What is that one thing?
Yeah, John, your thoughts?
Yeah, as I think back to my own I went through the 3 different training things over the different years. Even like with the pragmatic thing, I didn't do all the 37 boxes thing. It was an interesting framework to hang things on, but I don't think any of the companies, even the one where I took the whole team through that methodology, we didn't do it. So it could be argued we were part of the 88% that didn't apply the new skills. It's kind of depends on how you count that.
No, that's actually a great framing of it, because if you take, let's do some quick math. If you take 3 or 4 of those boxes and apply them, you could argue that we learned 37 boxes. We only applied 4 of them. That's 12%, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's what that stat is saying.
I know.
No, it's not.
But I mean, it does seem that, when you go through any good training class, that you're going to walk away with something. Hey, hopefully, 1 or 2 things per day. But, you came back and developed your user and buyer personas. That's a win, right? You came away with a prioritization method, perhaps. That's a win. And when I was designing courses for Pragmatic and now for myself, I always looked at everything from the standpoint that there needs to be one mind-blowing thing in this big section. There can be some stories, and there can be some slides, and there can be some foundations, and there can be some definitions, but there needs to be one thing for one thing that you've never heard anywhere else before, if you can.
That helps you apply it.
And I've tried to do that when I design courses.
Yeah, the ahas, these things that'll encourage people. Ooh, that's a great new idea. Never thought of that. Let me implement that now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think the key is to find a way to connect the content to something they can literally do.
Yeah.
Right.
Because if you don't start using it, it's just an academic exercise that you make.
Exactly. And, I did a training in California, and there was a guy, an older guy, and he and I had bonded pretty well. I mean, we're both old and nerds. And we remember, we actually told some mainframe stories to one another. It was all quite exciting. And at the end, I'm doing my big wrap up, my big rally. It's like, hey, go out and change the world. You are somebody, all that stuff. And he's sitting there with his arms crossed the whole time. And he said, you tell some good stories, but, I can't do any of this. And like, you can't do any of this? Any? And, I actually like to think of the way I teach as largely uh, civil disobedience. A lot of the things that I teach are things you can do without permission and encourage you to
Yeah.
do without even getting permission. There's
Yeah.
nothing that prevents you from going over and talk to customer support about the top 3 things they hear all the time. There are a number of things you can do without permission. But he's like, if my management isn't on board, I can't do any of this. And I'm just like, really? I mean, you want to be that defeated, And we've been in this class for 2 days, and he's just been sitting there the whole time going, yeah, I can't do that here. But somebody's going to stop me from doing that. And we're like, wow, take control, man.
Is there like a happy ending?
Well, yes, I suppose there is. I then reiterated, here are some of the things that you can do without permission. Blocking Tuesday and Thursday morning so you don't have any recurring meetings. Engaging with people inside the building, even if you can't engage with people outside the building. And I ticked off a bunch of things. And he, at first he was reluctant, but then he said, oh, you know what? A lot of those things are things I can do. But there certainly have been times when I have said things in class and somebody in the room says, does my boss know what you're saying to us now?
Yeah. Well, but I think there's also something in a 2-day lecture. It's going to be harder for people to see how they can implement it because they're not implementing it. They're not applying it. Right. We've talked often about the hands-on workshop, the coaching to get it done. I've talked before about Grassroots Strategy, great book that I read last year. I think, Steve, I got that one for you. And the way I know them is the 2 authors partnered with my business school marketing professor to build a strategic marketing program for Honeywell. And they called it Edusulting, which I thought was a terrible name. But what they did was they did a full week, and full project teams would come in. So it's like a project team that's working on an active DoD bid or something like that for Honeywell, or a project for something else. And they'd come in and they'd teach them segmentation, and then they would break and they'd have a consultant with each team, and they would actually take what they learned and they'd apply it. And it was go 4 or 5 days. Phil Cote, and so it was all teach, apply to a relevant thing with a team of people who are doing it. Phil Cote, the former chairman, CEO of Honeywell, said that the programs went through that, created $180 million of operating income a year. And that doesn't count the money they saved by killing things.
It's cool.
And so to me, that's how you have to do it. You have to teach, apply.
Well, and that's certainly the approach that I've tried to take.
Yes, I completely agree.